Amazing truth exposed. Female black judge stuns after police claim she stole her own car. Maya Thompson's life felt like a carefully balanced scale, her voice resonating in the courtroom with authority and conviction, heralded as a symbol of justice in a town that barely acknowledged her existence. But now, as she steps outside her father's home, gravity shifts. "Stolen vehicle," rings out from two officers who block her path with authority that feels like a guillotine over her neck. The universe tilts, panic rising, and her heart races, each beat echoing the disbelief coursing through her veins. This, a nightmare, leaves her breathless. The accusation seems ludicrous. Her reliable car, the result of years of toil, stands there like an extension of herself. How could they even think it, let alone say it? Confusion grips her, scrambling her thoughts. The well-oiled wheels of her mind slip, and she fumbles for words. A judge, who has fought for fairness, now thrust into the role of presumed criminal. She senses the gaze of her ancestors, the weight of their relentless struggles pressing down on her shoulders. Deep within, a storm brews. A mix of anger and trepidation sharpens her resolve. This isn't just about the car. It's an insidious reminder of the biases entwined within her community. She feels their scrutiny keenly, like a spotlight burning her skin. "I own this vehicle," she asserts, but her words stumble against the officer's resolute disbelief. Maya grapples with a surge of emotions, doubt mingling with indignation. How often has she seen such prejudice play out in her courtroom? Yet here it's personal. What if the public takes this as truth? What if the town she had strived to uplift turns against her? Each accusation feels like a dagger, chipping away at her character, dismantling the years she fought to build trust and integrity within the judicial system. A cacophony of worries fills her mind, racing until her breathing becomes shallow. Am I to be the next cautionary tale of injustice? She wonders, feeling the walls close in around her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the officers insist, a sense of wrath boils within her, eligible to unleash a battle that could transform her entire career. The implications are staggering. Exposing their incompetence could lead to overdue reform. Yet the fear of retaliation gnaws at her. What if she alienates the very community she's dedicated herself to? Despair mingles with determination, coiling inside her heart. Stress knots her stomach, reflecting on the legacy of resilience passed down by her parents. Could her pursuit of justice turn into a social sacrificial lamb? The thought is paralyzing, yet as they shout, saying she doesn't belong, whispers of her family history echo within her. Not just a judge, but a vessel of tenacity. She can feel ancestral strength coursing through her veins, like the roots of a mighty tree long aground. With a flicker of resolve opening within her chest, she contemplates forging ahead into the unforgiving landscape of this betrayal. Yet as her gaze unfurls back to the two officers, their disdain mirrors the stark reality she's all too familiar with, one built on skin color and deeply entrenched stereotypes. Her fingers tremble as she grips her keys, spine straightening. The battle lines are drawn, but there's no clarity in sight. Uncertainty looms heavy, a labyrinth of injustice that she must navigate. Each step toward the courtroom beckons an impending confrontation, not just for justice for herself, but perhaps even redefining what justice could be for those still trapped under the shadows of bias. Heart-clenching, Maya steels herself, eyes narrowing as she prepares to find her footing amidst the storm. What remains unresolved churns with palpable tension, urging her heart toward one inevitable truth. Something monumental is about to unfold. Maya's feet felt impossibly heavy as she stepped closer to the officers, her mind a flurry of conflicts and anxieties. She could swear they stepped forward in a way that signified authority, but internally she was racing through her options. The thought of engaging them directly sent electric jolts of fear through her, a stark reminder of her current reality. She was a judge, yes, but in their eyes she was merely a black woman, an identity stripped of her professional accomplishments in this moment of accusation. "Do you have any documentation?" one officer snapped, his tone clipped, robbing her of the dignity she had cultivated. Maya swallowed hard. Her hands shook involuntarily, not just from the cold of the evening air, but from the turbulence twisting in her stomach. Would validating her ownership even matter? Such forms felt utterly trivial in the face of their judgments. Digging her nails into her palm, she remembered the words of her father, echoing like a mantra in her mind. "Stand firm like an oak, even in the fiercest winds." In that moment of chaos, she felt vaguely reminded of the cases she had ruled on. Each one had required her to tether herself to principles of justice, but the irony wasn't lost on her. The very system she had fought to uphold was now pointing fingers at her. "Can you even afford this car?" a second officer asked, laughing derisively, the imbalance of privilege and power on full display. It ignited a flame within her, a force she had so carefully harnessed over years of navigating the injustice that often clouded her community. But rage alone would not suffice in this precarious moment. She needed strategy, clarity, something to anchor her so the storm of emotions didn't swallow her whole. Maya recalled the many times she had stood before juries, unearthing buried truths and exposing biases with careful analysis. Now she needed to wield that same clarity of thought against this affront. "I demand to speak to a supervisor," she said, words sharper than she intended. But a small victory flared in her chest, asserting that request was a crack in their facade of power. Yet doubt niggled at her again. Would anyone care? Would a higher authority uphold her rights as a judge? Or would she face a wall of dismissal? The weight of racial bias hung heavily in the air. She could almost taste the acidic tang of mediocrity from those who wished to reduce her to a stereotype, and it left a bitter residue on her tongue. While the officers exchanged glances, she took stock of her surroundings. The town she embraced could either amplify or obliterate her. With each tick of the evening clock, she contemplated her next move, the ever-growing need for justice echoing like a relentless drumbeat. Maya took a deep breath. She could not simply react. She needed to plan. Each misrepresentation she faced struck at the core of her identity, and in the process, an unexpected truth surfaced. The incident could serve as a litmus test, a pivotal moment that defined her career moving forward. Was she willing to turn this senseless accusation into a vehicle for truth, exposing systemic failures in the very place where she'd sought to foster understanding and righteousness? This was no longer merely about her trapped at the intersection of justice and injustice. It had transformed into a quest for something larger. Steeling herself to fight, she felt fiery determination igniting in her veins. "If you want to make a case, let's do this right," she thought, secretly wishing she could unleash her legal acumen, blending anger with intellect. Eyeing her watchers, she prepared for a confrontation that would not only reclaim her identity, but potentially redefine how justice could work or fail in their world, which had overlooked unyielding voices far too long. But as she steadied her breathing, interwoven nerves and resolve coursing through her, she couldn't shake the sense of impending judgment lingering like a cloud above. The struggle between her personal dignity and the system's scrutiny loomed, an unsettling feeling wrapping around her throat. Could she confront them in a way that shook the foundation of their biases? With each question echoing in her mind, Maya realized one monumental truth. She was not just rebelling against this incident, she was about to embark on a journey to fight the pervasive injustices that whispered in the shadows. But would she be bold enough to seize the reins, or would these defining moments dissolve her resolve? The next step loomed ahead, determining how she would confront the reality waiting for her. Maya's resolve crystallized as the officers turned away to confer, a sliver of time that felt simultaneously infinite and compressed. Each second that ticked by sharpened her focus. This was not merely about a car. It was about confronting an insidious bias that had seeped into her professional life. All those abstract debates in courtrooms about justice and equality now felt suffocatingly personal. Taking a step back, she scanned the parking lot, noting the ambient sounds of the evening. A distant car honked, a dog barked, and the wind rustled through the trees, mundane sounds mocking the charged atmosphere. Where others might find fear, she began to find clarity. Wasn't this the environment she had painstakingly navigated as a judge? The treacherous terrain of assumptions and misconceptions was the battleground she knew, even if she had never expected her own life to become a focal point in that struggle. "Ma'am," the first officer's grating tone cut through her thoughts, pulling her back to the moment. "You really think we're going to let you walk away without proper verification?" Maya met his gaze, refusing to blink or retreat. "I think it is your duty to ensure justice is applied fairly, even when confronted with someone who may not fit your preconceived notions." The words slipped out, sharper than she intended, but they held the weight of her years of experience. He shifted, the surprise evident on his face, but the second officer's sneer stayed firmly in place. She sensed the shifting dynamics. Although they remained steadfast in their authority, her words had planted the seeds of doubt. In the ensuing moments, her mind raced through her options while embracing the need for strategy. Calling for a supervisor was not merely an act of defiance, it was a calculated move to buy time. With the right person involved, perhaps her arguments could reach a higher echelon, where authority might acknowledge the depth of her experience and the irrelevance of the superficial judgments they had already passed. And just like that, Maya felt the familiar thrill of the courtroom pulse through her veins, a rush of empowerment sparked by the possibility of advocating for herself. She wondered if this could be a chance to not only reclaim her dignity, but to expose the deeper failings of a system she had pledged to uphold. What would it mean for others trapped under similar misconceptions if she triumphed here tonight? But still, an underlying worry surfaced. How would she present her case without painting herself as an adversary? The line between demanding respect and appearing combative was tenuous, especially when engaging with those whose biases were a barrier she was determined to dismantle. As the first officer turned back, attempting to regain control of the situation, Maya prepared to dig deeper. "I have the title and my identification in my bag," she stated firmly. She took a step toward her vehicle, intent on retrieving them as proof. "Wait! Don't move!" he barked a little too aggressively. "On what grounds?" Maya challenged, her voice calm, though she felt the anxiety creeping back. There it was again, the unfiltered need to assert herself amid their escalating hostility. "Because we're still investigating," he replied, but his tone faltered. This was her moment. His uncertainty was tangible, and she seized it like a weapon. "Investigation. The only thing needing inspection is your behavior. I will not be a victim of prejudice." This time, she held her gaze steady, unwilling to let the simmering anger within her bubble over. The police officer's facade cracked, exposing the uncomfortable truth that for every time she had stood before a jury advocating for justice, she was now demanding it for herself in the harshest light. The officer looked momentarily disoriented, surprised by her rebuttal. Maya felt the energy shift, and with it a fire ignited inside her. The stakes were higher, the implications of this encounter stretched beyond her. Each moment was a step toward illuminating the dark corners of bias. Her heart pounded, a rhythm echoing the urgency of her mission. "You think you're imposing authority," she thought, "but this moment belongs to me." As she prepared to stand firm and unveil her documentation, a startling realization hit her. She had begun a fight that transcended her situation. If she could challenge the assumptions of those sworn to serve and protect, perhaps it could inspire others to break their silence. The journey had shifted. What lay ahead was no longer just self-defense, but an opportunity to redefine the narrative. Maya took a deep breath, the resolve surging through her once again. She was no longer simply fighting for her identity. She was on the precipice of unleashing a movement, reflections binding into purpose. But just as she steeled herself for the next confrontation, tension crackled in the air. A car pulled into the parking lot, the headlights glaring, and her heart skipped. Was this the supervisor she had called for, or something more detrimental? Questions swirled, and with them emerged a realization. The next battle had just begun, and it illuminated the path forward, or perhaps even a terrifying descent into deeper conflict. Would her stand result in vindication, or would the moment unravel, plunging her into unexpected depths of scrutiny? The headlights of the approaching car sliced through the darkness, illuminating the parking lot with an intensity that turned everything into stark contrast. Maya's heart raced as she took in the silhouette of the vehicle, its contours marked sharply against the night. Her mind scrambled to make sense of the situation, and yet a certain clarity emerged. This was not merely about a confrontation. It was the crucible of her experience as a judge, bringing forth critical changes in her life. As the vehicle rolled to a stop, she mentally steeled herself. If this was indeed the supervisor she had called for, Maya knew she had to present her case with clarity and assertiveness. There could be no hesitation. Doubt could easily undermine her credibility at this pivotal moment. She instinctively adjusted her posture, straightening her back and lifting her chin slightly, ready to embody the authority she had cultivated in the courtroom. The car door opened, and a tall woman emerged, her uniform crisp against the backdrop of the lot. Her expression was unreadable as she surveyed the scene. A tension crackled in the air, and Maya felt its weight bearing down on her, stoking the embers of her righteous indignation. "Officer Martin, what's going on here?" the newcomer inquired, her voice commanding but cautious. There was authority in her demeanor that resonated with Maya, yet there was also a flicker of curiosity that suggested the woman was open to hearing both sides. "It's just a misunderstanding," Officer Martin replied, his bravado waning, his eyes darting to Maya, who was preparing to make her case. Maya stepped forward, finding her voice steady despite the anxiety threatening to ripple through her. "I'm Judge Maya Thompson. I was stopped under suspicion of vehicle theft while driving my own car. I have my identification with me, and I would like to resolve this without further delay." The supervisor's gaze shifted to Maya, her brow furrowing slightly as she processed the information. "And you feel that this situation is rooted in bias?" "Yes," Maya asserted, taking a breath to steady herself. "I've faced scrutiny based not on my actions, but on preconceived notions. I urge you to examine both the behavior of your officers and the systemic issues at play here." Her words rang with the conviction of years spent navigating the judicial system, a system bent on justice, yet often compromised by individual frailties. The officer's expression softened, but only slightly. Maya's heart raced anew as she realized she was walking a fine line between confrontation and cooperation. She needed to ensure that her assertion of bias didn't come off as simply defensive, but rather as a call for accountability. "You expect me to believe the only problem is prejudice?" Officer Martin scoffed, the disbelief etched in his features. "What about keeping the public safe? We're just doing our jobs here." "Your job requires you to uphold the law," Maya countered, her voice calm but insistent. "Upholding the law means ensuring that it is applied equally, regardless of race or appearance. I could be another person who just walks away, feeling unjustly treated. But I refuse to remain silent. I'm committed to ensuring this doesn't happen to anyone else. The tension in the air shifted again. It was dynamic, a palpable battlefield of minds colliding, perspectives shifting. For every moment she spent explaining her rationale, for every detail she embedded in her responses, Maya felt layers of her identity unraveling and reforming anew. She was not only defending herself, this was defining a new version of herself, one rooted in strength, derived from vulnerability and opposing bias. The supervisor held her gaze, an understanding flickering in her eyes. "I'll need to see your identification," she finally said, shifting her tone. Maya felt a sense of cautious optimism. The moment hung suspended between confrontation and resolution. As she reached for her bag, a sudden wave of realization crashed over her. This was her chance, an opportunity not only to reclaim her identity, but to transform the narrative she had played into. The voice in her head had become a rallying cry. She was on the cusp of igniting change, rooted in the very experiences she had long fought against. But just as Maya unzipped her bag, the sudden crackle of radios disrupted the moment as more officers arrived on the scene. The tension she had fought so hard to level now threatened to spiral out of control. Had she stirred a hornet's nest more dangerous than she had anticipated? An uncharted challenge loomed, and Maya felt the ground beneath her shift. The confrontation had just escalated, and what began as a stand for personal justice now felt like a larger battle in a much broader war. As she pulled out her ID, uncertainty gnawed at her. Would she find allies among these newcomers, or merely further antagonism? The stakes rose, and with them the pressure to not only hold her ground, but to redefine the boundary of what justice would demand of her. This wasn't just an encounter with the law. It had transformed into a pivotal crossroads in her life. Would she be the catalyst for needed reform, or would the unforeseen complexities of conflict change everything she thought she understood about justice? Maya's fingers trembled slightly as she withdrew her identification from her bag. The metallic glint of her badge reminded her of the vast responsibilities resting on her shoulders, a reminder of everything she stood for as both a judge and a person navigating the biases she had faced all her life. The added buzz of radios and the footsteps of the new officers echoed in the background, amplifying the tension in the air. A knot formed in her stomach. This was no longer just an incident. It had evolved into a moment that would require careful strategy. Would these new officers recognize her authority, or would they view her as simply another suspect? As the additional officers approached, one of them, a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, exchanged a glance with Officer Martin, confusion flickering on his face. Maya seized the moment. She couldn't allow the narrative to shift away from her. "I'd like to address what's going on here," she declared, projecting her voice with authority. Officer Martin crossed his arms, a heavy scowl still etched on his face. "All we're doing is making sure the public is safe," he insisted, a blend of defensiveness and aggression in his tone. Maya met his gaze unflinchingly. "And I get that, Officer Martin. But remember that the public includes me. The law doesn't cease to apply because of someone's assumptions," she pressed, taking a step closer so that the distance was minimal. The young officer shifted his weight, eyeing Maya's badge again. "What's the situation here?" he asked, uncertainty creeping into his voice. Maya was surprised by his willingness to engage. Here was an opening, an opportunity to transform the atmosphere from confrontation to chance for dialogue. "I was stopped under suspicion of a crime I have not committed. I'm a judge, and I firmly believe this encounter illustrates broader issues of racial bias within your department." The tension shifted, and for the first time she saw recognition dawn on the young officer's face. "You're Judge Thompson?" he questioned, a hint of respect creeping into his voice. "Yes," she answered, holding her head high, heart racing with a mixture of anxiety and determination. It's important for all of you to understand that while it is essential to uphold the law, it's equally important to realize that biases affect those we seek to protect. In that moment, Maya could feel the complexity of her situation enveloping her. Here she stood, on the edge of a precipice. Could she use this confrontation to reform perceptions? Would they take her seriously? Or would they simply dismiss her as just another voice in a sea of dissent? Each second seemed to stretch as she awaited their reaction. Officer Martin's brow furrowed even deeper, clearly grappling with the implications of Maya's claims. Meanwhile, the supervisor, previously quiet, moved closer, her stance softening as Maya spoke. "I will not be here just to defend my own dignity, but to ensure that systemic injustices are acknowledged and addressed," Maya asserted, her tone unwavering. "Knowing the law isn't enough if we don't embody the principles of fairness." The supervisor glanced at her colleagues. The air was thick with debate. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we engage in a discussion, training perhaps, about how biases influence policing. And if you want my support, I'm here to help facilitate those discussions." A cascade of thoughts rushed through Maya's mind, forcing her to confront her own experiences with the judicial system. She had felt unworthy, inadequate. But now, as she stood before these officers, she realized she wielded the power to reshape narratives through dialogue. And then, in the midst of that tension, the moment shattered. A fourth officer, burly and brimming with authority, arrived on the scene. "What's going on here? Why are we wasting time?" he barked, brow raised and attention demanding. The shift of focus ignited the air once more, pushing Maya to question whether the potential for change was slipping through her fingers. "Judge Thompson?" Officer Martin called, just as the new officer latched onto the mood. "What do you want from us?" For the first time, Maya felt her heart hammering not out of fear, but fierce hope. It was ambiguous, nerve-wracking, and raw, but the opportunity was right in front of her. "Understanding," she replied, steeling herself against the anxiety that threatened to rise again. Understanding and accountability. As she prepared to articulate further, the real challenge crystallized in her mind. Could she truly inspire transformation in a world that often silenced voices like hers? The reply from the newcomer hovered in the air, hanging like a sword over her heart. Would they take her seriously, or would she remain just a figure to be challenged and dismissed? In that moment of intense reckoning, Maya realized that the battle for justice was not just about the fight against bias in the system. It was about the battle within herself, reaffirming her worth and the truth that she could change her narrative. Maya's breath seemed to hitch as all eyes turned towards the newly arrived officer. His authoritative stance and hardened features posed a formidable challenge, and she felt the weight of his scrutiny pressing down like a physical force. In that charged silence, every moment felt like a test, each second adding layers of pressure to her resolve. "Your understanding of this situation seems a bit skewed," the newcomer barked, dismissing her plea with an air of disdain. "Or are you trying to make a scene out here?" Maya reminded herself that she was navigating not just an encounter, but an opportunity to redefine perceptions, a chance to elevate the conversation surrounding justice and equality. But doubts crept into her thoughts, insidiously whispering questions of her credibility. "Look, officer," she started, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her gut. "My badge represents my responsibility to uphold justice, not just for myself, but for everyone. You misunderstand the nature of this stop." The young officer, still standing nearby, shifted uneasily, as if torn between the authority of his superior and the momentousness of what Maya was saying. She sensed a flicker of understanding in him. Perhaps he wasn't as entrenched in his biases as Officer Martin. "Your position means nothing if you're just going to use it to deflect legitimate concerns," the newcomer shot back, his words designed to cast doubt. But Maya had grappled with dismissiveness her entire career. This was not the moment to retreat. Remembering her mantra of resilience, she leaned into her convictions. "I'm simply asking for an acknowledgement of the realities we face," she pressed, locking her gaze with Officer Martin's. "This isn't about me against you. It's about us together confronting these systemic realities." The atmosphere shifted again. The initial adrenaline buzz morphed into something heavier as Maya saw the myriad reactions ripple across the officer's expressions. A sense of yearning for change flickered in the eyes of the young officer, even as the burly officer continued to look skeptical. "Change is uncomfortable," she continued, the words flowing from her with increasing clarity, "but it is essential if we are to effectively serve our community. How can we move forward together if there is no room for dialogue? You need to grasp that your perception of the community is sometimes clouded by unwarranted biases." Her resolve fueled her persuasion, and she could feel the walls slowly starting to crack. In that moment, Maya recognized her own power, not just as a judge, but as an advocate willing to confront the status quo, even in the face of adverse judgment from someone who wielded authority without regard for justice. But would her boldness yield any fruit? Would they genuinely consider her proposal for dialogue and training, or would the ingrained mentality of their practices shut her out? "Okay, let's say we entertain this discussion of yours," the newcomer offered, still skeptical but curious. "What then? You think a few sessions in a room will fix everything?" The opening was tentative yet illuminating, exposing a willingness to engage, even if it remained buried beneath layers of defensiveness. Maya sensed that the moment had shifted, pulsating with the potential for real change. "Yes, it could change attitudes," she replied, her voice laced with iron conviction. "Training can lead to awareness, understanding, and ultimately compassion. But it starts with you all in this very moment." The young officer hesitated again, processing her words, while Officer Martin's scowl softened slightly, as if reconsidering his stance. Maya seized on the silence, breathing deeply to steady herself. "Change is not only possible, but necessary. If you are capable of enforcing the law, then you must also be willing to confront why certain assumptions are made. What I want from you, all of you, is an opportunity to transform this experience into something significant." As the tension hung in the air, pregnant with unspoken thoughts, Maya wondered how far her voice could reach in this moment. She had pushed boundaries, laid her vulnerabilities bare, and now it was time to make a choice. Would they leap forward and embrace the unease of change, or would they retreat into their comfort zones and silence her truths? The collective silence began to fracture, revealing a hesitant willingness to engage, and as Maya prepared herself for their reply, a sharp realization struck her. The success of this encounter hinged not just on their responses, but also on her ability to maintain her ground in the face of relentless doubt. Suddenly, a fire engine blared in the distance, jolting her attention. The reality of their situation came rushing back, and she pondered. The stakes had never been higher. Would her voice echo beyond this moment, or would it be drowned out yet again by the cacophony of biases entrenched within the system? "Tomorrow might be too late to start this dialogue," the newcomer murmured cautiously, an unexpected glimmer of openness emerging. Maya felt a rush of hope coursing through her. Perhaps that would be the first step in the right direction, but as much as she wanted to believe it, the question still lay at the forefront of her mind. Would her desire for change be enough to inspire the reckoning she aimed for? The moment held its breath, and the next utterance would either ignite transformation or further entrench division. The stakes had never been higher, and Maya braced herself. She was determined to ensure her narrative would not end here, regardless of the outcome. Maya held her breath, the pulse of uncertainty throbbing in the back of her mind as she waited for the next move in this fraught social chess game. Officer Martin looked around, gauging the reactions of his colleagues, and for a fleeting moment, Anxiety crossed his features. Each second stretched, elongated by the gravity of the decision lying ahead. "What's next, then?" he finally asked, a tinge of hesitance creeping into his voice, indicating that she might not be as alone in this as she initially feared. Maya seized the moment, but felt the weight of 1,000 conversations pressing against her throat. Next, we acknowledge that these conversations are not merely administrative exercises. They require dedication, introspection, and willingness to change. Each officer here today has a role in shaping how our communities interact with the law. As she spoke, a steady resolve surged within her. The strength she drew from her own experiences, navigating through prejudice, pushing back against silence, was no longer just a flicker. It had transformed into a fire she needed to share. "Yes, we can hold sessions." Her voice rose, firm and unwavering, but these sessions should challenge both our comfort levels and our perceptions. They should disrupt the narratives we've grown accustomed to. Empowerment isn't just about understanding the law, it's about listening and engaging with those we serve. The young officer nodded slowly, and for the first time Maya saw the glimmer of curiosity in his eyes, a flicker of hope amidst her uncertainties. "What do you suggest we do?" Martin asked, skepticism still lacing his words, but now tinged with something else, perhaps an inkling of desperation for resolution. "Let's start small. Roundtable discussions, where each officer shares their perspectives and experiences with the community. Create spaces for us to learn from each other. Understand the realities of both policing and those who feel policed. We need to encourage empathy and build relationships," she said, envisioning the foundation of what could be a transformative journey. Maya noted how the younger officer leaned in, captivated. This was more than a dialogue. It was an opportunity for personal growth, his and perhaps the others. But she also felt Martin's hardened resolve that could either bolster her proposal or derail it entirely. "Empathy?" he scoffed, dredging up contempt. "You seriously believe we can just flip a switch?" The challenge lay heavy between them. Maya recognized this as not just a hurdle, but an invitation to engage in deeper conflict. "It's not about flipping a switch, but rather developing understanding over time," she countered firmly. "Each of you has a constitutional obligation to serve the community, which necessitates recognizing and addressing biases. This is not merely idealism, it's your duty." As the room pulsed with tension, Maya found a wellspring of inner strength, pulling from the discontent that had fueled her career. She had battled these stereotypes and doubts before, not just as a judge, but as a person from an underrepresented background carving space in a domain replete with obstacles. "People are not just statistics," she asserted. "They are individuals with stories shaped by systemic issues that perpetuate ignorance. If we don't confront that, if we don't bring those narratives into the light, we're failing in our responsibilities." Maya's heart raced as she watched Martin's expression shift, caught between his role as an authority figure and a human grappling with something deeper. The young officer now looked directly at him, unearthing a dialogue that extended beyond Maya's words. As the silence enveloped them once again, the tension transformed into an unexpected calm. Maya realized her confidence had ignited a flicker within the department that had been long suppressed. She had shifted the narrative from confrontation to collaboration, but the journey was still in its nascent stages. "You think that just talking can change decades of mentality?" Martin challenged, yet the edge in his tone softened. "Contrast, yes. Talking leads to thoughts evolving into actions," Maya replied. "But it isn't easy. I'm asking everyone here to start with a willingness to approach their shortcomings, to listen, and to really hear the community's voice. No progress can happen without a mutual commitment." Each word resonated louder, the weight of her ambition creating ripples in the silence. The unease remained palpable, yet there was also the dawning awareness that transformation was not just necessary, but inevitable if approached with honesty and courage. As they stood in that moment, Maya questioned her own doubts once more. Was she truly ready for this fight? Because she sensed their forthcoming decision would not just define this dialogue, but also the future of her own aspirations. The stakes rose, and she envisioned herself stepping into a role no judge before her had dared embrace fully. The real question is, are you ready to begin this transformative journey together? The room held its collective breath, and the next moment could either herald a new chapter of understanding or reconstruct barriers long thought impassable. What would it take to awaken the courage in the faces before her and move beyond discourse into action? As she pondered, the enveloping silence hinted that their response would either fracture the fragile bridge or solidify it into something strong and enduring. Maya felt the palpable tension cling to the air, the long-held beliefs hanging like shadows on the walls around her. The silence felt heavier, suffocating almost, as she awaited a response. Every second ticked away, amplifying her uncertainty while urging her to bridge the divide. Martin cleared his throat, his apprehension nakedly apparent as he shifted in his seat. "Look, Maya, I get that you're passionate about this, but I need to know, practically speaking, what does this look like?" His question, though laced with skepticism, felt like an opening. She could choose to view it as a challenge or an opportunity. Taking a deep breath, she leaned forward. "First, we set up these discussions, one per month to start. Topics could range from community expectations of law enforcement to personal experiences of bias. We create a structured environment for sharing, not just officers sharing their experiences, but community members stepping forward to share theirs. We manage to build connections where there's been silence." Martin furrowed his brow. "And you think just sitting around and talking is going to actually make a difference? Is that it?" She bristled at his dismissal, but Maya knew she had to maintain her composure. "No, Martin, it's not just talking. It's about fostering an environment where we are willing to listen and learn. Change starts with vulnerability, acknowledging our own biases. If we can't even share our own stories, how can we expect to understand what others experience?" He hesitated, the crack in his resolve slowly widening. Maya pressed on, feeling the momentum swell like a tide. "I understand that many of you have been trained to see the world through a particular lens. Your experiences reinforce those beliefs. But by providing space for community voices, we can all begin to see through each other's eyes." The younger officer raised his hand, his eagerness breaking the frost that had seemingly settled in the room. "I'd like to hear from people about their experiences. I've only known my side of the badge. I want to understand the bigger picture." Maya's heart surged with hope at this budding expression of empathy. This moment could very well ignite the spark of transformation. Exactly. It could be eye-opening. Imagine hearing firsthand the struggles people face. A mother trying to protect her children in a neighborhood that feels hostile, or a young man who worries that his appearance might provoke suspicion. When we hear these stories, we begin to recognize their humanity. Martin's gaze drifted as he contemplated her words, the lines on his forehead slightly softening. "There's risk in this," Maya warned, grounding her voice in realism. "Some officers might feel uncomfortable confronting their own biases, and community members might be wary of opening up. But without diving into that discomfort, we can't truly appreciate the depth of these layered issues. We must commit to navigating this messiness together." A hum of agreement rippled around the room, breaking the ice that had briefly frozen their discussions. But a flicker of doubt gripped Maya's mind. What if Martin's scrutiny would dim the growing willingness to engage? "And who decides which stories get told?" Martin asked, irritation creeping back into his words. "That's a fair point," Maya admitted, meeting his gaze head-on. "It's imperative for community representatives to have this agency. Officers will act as active listeners rather than gatekeepers of narrative. We need to create equity in the way these conversations are approached." Her voice faltered for only a moment, revealing a crack in her otherwise confident facade. Would this be enough? Would her efforts resonate profoundly enough to break down long-standing barriers? Why should I trust that anything will change if these discussions merely restate what's already been said? Martin challenged, punctuating his words with rising anger. Her heart raced as the weight of his challenge bore down on her. Trust is built on actions that follow words, Martin. We'll have to prove that we're committed to doing more than just talking. Each roundtable can be followed up with measurable changes, action plans to address the issues discussed. It's an ongoing commitment. Would they embrace her vision or retreat into the comfort of their established norms? That remained uncertain. The door swung open, and the chief of the department entered, his brow furrowed. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his attention drawn to the charged atmosphere. Maya felt the urgent need to answer. Not just for herself, but for everyone in the room. Would everything they'd built break apart before it had a chance to grow? She glanced around, feeling the weight of her responsibility. "We're discussing how we can engage our community and confront our biases. We're ready for change." The chief's brows knitted tighter at her declaration. As the air thickened with tension yet again, Maya had to wonder, had she gone too far? Or had the embers of conversation truly begun to ignite into something more powerful? The outcome lingered precariously, on the verge of chaos or connection. Would her quest for understanding ultimately reshape the dynamic within the department, or would this confrontation expose deeper fractures yet to be addressed? Maya's heart thudded in time with the heavy silence filling the room. She felt every pair of eyes scrutinizing her, judging her words not just for what they were, but for what they could mean. Already the chief seemed unconvinced, skepticism carved into his expression. As the lead officer in the department, he wielded authority far beyond her own, and she knew the gravity of this moment. With a steadying breath, she endeavored to reshape the tension into something more constructive. "We acknowledge the discomfort, but that's part of the process. Together, we should explore what's beneath these critical conversations. Aside from dialogue, what actionable measures have you considered?" The chief's voice carved through the silence. It commanded attention and invited her to elaborate, possibly out of curiosity, or more likely, in search of weakness. Maya recognized the opportunity. We can implement feedback from these sessions, perhaps not only to log discussions, but to also create an avenue for tangible progress reports. Maybe we could involve community organizations in developing strategies that address specific issues raised in these conversations. Her words hung in the air as she felt the chief's gaze sharpen into something more analytical, a thread of excitement unspooled within her. She was no longer speaking just to defend her ideas. She was outlining a plan. The chief's expression remained unreadable, however, shifting briefly to Martin, who crossed his arms. "You think that's enough to bridge this divide?" "That's a big leap," he interjected, skepticism still heavy in his tone. "Every leap begins with a single step. Think about it. We often complain about a lack of understanding, yet we have the chance to cultivate it," she replied, grounding her voice in conviction. Martin shook his head, weighing her words. "It seems idealistic. The same stories will be told over and over. People get tired of just talking." Maya resisted the urge to debate Martin's authority further. Instead, she focused on the unfolding dynamic among her colleagues. How could she engage them to see past their limitations? She decided to risk vulnerability. "Martin, I struggle with this too. I want to believe that talking leads to something impactful because I've seen firsthand the consequences of misunderstanding." She locked her gaze onto his, willing him to understand the weight of her sincerity. The young officer chimed in again. "I believe in this. I want to hear these stories directly. If we can change even one person's perspective." The group began to warm, a surge of cautious optimism rippling between them. Maya could see it. Small nods, a shift in posture, the growing openness of discussion. Each participant appeared to grapple with their biases even as they were drawn into her vision. "We need to identify what truly matters," Maya pressed. "Community safety isn't just numbers, it's feelings of security, empathy, and trust. That requires hard conversations." She hoped integrity would prevail among her colleagues. Yet beneath her resolve, doubt crept in. What if her courage led to failure? What if the discomfort they experienced culminated in confrontation rather than resolution, leaving her efforts in tatters? "Well, if you need approval for additional resources or partnerships, you'll have to demonstrate the value of these discussions to me and to others. You say you want change. Will you be able to show it?" The chief's challenges echoed in her mind, but they also kindled her determination. "I can," she replied finally, a surge of resolve coursing through her at the prospect of aligning her ideals with actionable steps. "But I will need your support, all of you. Change cannot happen alone." The chief's brow furrowed, and for a moment Maya glimpsed the gears of his mind in motion. What would it take for her vision to take flight? She watched as he seemed to assess the room's shifting energy and her growing involvement. There was momentum now, but it felt tenuous, ready to slip away. Instinctively, she felt the weight of responsibility surge within her. What if this time they failed to move past mere dialogue, mulling over the possibilities of what they might lose in the process if they were to retreat into safe silences? "Let's take a vote," the chief suggested abruptly, a hint of tension lacing his directive. "If we proceed, we must all be on board." Maya inhaled sharply, aware this decision would solidify her path. Would they commit to her vision, or would their collective fear create a chasm wider than she imagined? This vote would not just determine her proposal's fate, it would shape her future within this community. The moment loomed clearly before her, destiny dangling delicately. Would they choose to leap with her or hold back? As the votes were cast, a blend of trepidation and hope swept over her. What would this decision reveal about the people she had come to consider colleagues? Maya braced herself, the room charged with potential energy, awaiting the decision that could alter the trajectory of their shared path. Maya felt the world around her come to a standstill as the votes were cast, her heart drumming a relentless rhythm of anxiety. The air was thick with expectation, carrying the weight of her aspirations and the fear of rejection. The moment stretched, each second amplifying the collective anticipation within the room. As the chief finished tallying the votes, his expression betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. "The final count is 5 in favor, 2 against," he announced slowly, lifting his gaze to meet Maya's. "We will move forward with the discussions you proposed." A rush of exhilaration surged within Maya, filling the voids of worry she had carried through the confrontation. Their willingness to proceed wasn't just a victory for her. It was a chance to rewrite their shared narrative, to honor the promise of understanding and collaboration that had eluded so many in her community. With steely resolve underpinning her words, she responded, "This is just the beginning. Together, we will create spaces for dialogue that affirm our commitment to justice and equity." The words resonated with a newfound strength, cementing her role not only as a judge, but as a catalyst for transformation within their ranks. The weight of that victory brought a satisfaction that solidified her sense of purpose. For too long, she had found herself caught in cycles of bias. Standing there, Maya understood she had harnessed her past, not as a burden, but as fuel to propel her toward her mission. The reverberations of resistance she had faced melted away, transforming into unwavering confidence. With the groundwork laid for future discussions, Maya took a moment to reflect on her journey. Before this confrontation, she had doubted whether she could advocate for clarity and accountability, but now, as her colleagues begrudgingly recognized the depth of their shared responsibility, she came to understand her own resilience was an essential thread in the fabric of their community. Days turned into weeks, and the round-table discussions blossomed as planned. Community members voiced their experiences, while officers shared their perspectives of navigating situations that often left them questions about morality and integrity. Eyes that had once looked past one another began to meet in understanding, allowing empathy to flourish in place of assumptions. The profound evolution of perspectives racked Maya with both pride and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Her efforts, bolstered by a commitment to be the change she wished to see, had ignited conversations and cultivated a willingness to listen and learn. Just a month later, she found herself sharing a spotlight at a joint town hall meeting, surrounded by officers eager to encourage a new approach to law enforcement. Maya stood at the podium, reflecting on how each courageous conversation had chipped away at the biases haunting her community. Recognition came not through accolades, but through tangible progress. A community firm in their resolve to reshape their story together. She felt validated in her quest, her once uncertain voice now a fully formed expression of authority. As the meeting wrapped up, applause warmly enveloped her, the weight of acknowledgement washing away the doubts that had once encumbered her. Her colleagues were no longer merely law enforcers. They were now visible allies, ready to combat the injustices lurking behind their badges. She felt a strength emerge from within, one that permanently shifted her understanding of leadership. Maya knew she had conquered not just the immediate challenges posed that fateful night, but the insidious biases within the very fabric of her profession. She had transformed uncertainty into concrete actions that not only healed her own wounds, but sheathed the challenges faced by many others. This was her legacy, not the ascent of a single judge, but the elevation of an entire community trembling with hope. Today, she not only reignited her purpose, but also established her position as a leader for change. Provoked by a single moment of injustice, she had ultimately charted a course toward justice for all. The heart of her quest remained firm and unyielding, shoulders squared, eyes bright with determination. Maya Thompson, now firmly rooted in her identity as an advocate for systemic change, had achieved the impossible. And now, dear viewer, the moment to clarify your commitment to these powerful stories is here. You need to subscribe now to ensure you catch the next exclusive emotional journeys that will inspire you to break through your own barriers. Leave a like now to enrich the algorithm and bring these compelling tales to light. Comment below your thoughts on Maya's transformation. What did you learn? What are your theories about the next chapter of her journey? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how a single moment can change not just one life, but reshape an entire community. Your support makes all the difference.